Okay, today's video we're going to talk about why PPC agencies or PPC services, whatever you want to call them, choose to have these darn setup fees. What are they? How much are they supposed to be? Are they worth it? Are you getting ripped off? All of that's going to be covered in this video. I'm going to cover this topic from the angle of, yes, it's a little bit one-sided, you could call it, as I run an agency, but I also, the other thing I do is I look at many other agencies' ad accounts when I audit different accounts. I've audited 300, 400, 500 different ad accounts and then they're all different agencies. I get to see what good work is done from the good to the bad. And I also just understand we are the only agency that does any contingency work where we sometimes offer, if you've already got campaigns going, you don't have to pay up front until we get you another 25%, 50, 100%, whatever, up front as a kind of a differentiator. But I understand, because I have to get results to get paid a lot of times, what's actually going to work and what's not. I'm not guessing anymore. I'm not doing this to guess because it doesn't work. Basically, okay? I can't waste all the time doing work where I don't know if it's going to work or not. So I've figured out over the last 15 years of doing PPC what works, what doesn't. As far as what goes into setup, I'll explain all that, what you need, what you don't need. There is some setup that you need. I'll explain and put into reference the ones that are charging the fees, what you're actually, do you need it, and to what degree are you getting your money's worth? But also going to go a little bit further than that, how to pick the right, basically agency, given, you know that you have to pay something to get your stuff set up right. A lot of firms are just a scam altogether, no matter what you pay. If you pay $20,000, doesn't mean it's not a scam. So anyway, I'm going to cover all that on today's video. So even though our firm does not typically charge a setup fee, about 90% of the PPC agencies out there will, unless they, one, already charge thousands a month in fees. And the reason why I say that is because there's still a world out there where agencies, because people want to hear this, it's easy to sell something to somebody when you can just tell them what they want to hear. You don't need any sales skills. But it's generally a scam, because what people want and what the reality is usually there's not a match. A good, honest salesperson will disagree with you or try to talk you out of what you really want and guide you in the right direction. But, respectively, there's, lost my train of thought here briefly here. So, they'll charge you. So if a fee, sorry, got my train of thought here again. So if they don't charge you very much, to where they're charging you 10% of ad spend, 15% of ad spend, and given most companies don't start out, some do, but let's say 80% of the people starting out with an ad agency isn't spending 30 grand a month. You take your 10% of that paltry 3 grand that you're spending, it's nothing. It's not even close to do anything productive when you got to pay staff and then you got to mark up their salary 3 times. You could forget it. It's what people want to hear because they don't want to spend time on it and they don't want to spend a lot, and you're wasting your time most of the time. So that's the first thing up, right out front. But if the firm's actually honest, they'll charge a lot more because it actually takes time to do things right. And if you want to be the leader of your market and you have to get above where the other people that have been in it for a while, it's not going to be done for $300 a month. It's going to be done for $1, $2, $3 grand a month at minimum. So if they charge those thousands a month fees, so in other words, what a lot of firms will do like us is they'll charge a percentage, but there'll be a minimum fee. So if you don't spend enough, you're automatically kicked up to that $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a month. Why? Because we're not going to take your money and do no work, which these other firms are doing. They know you want to hear it costs $300 a month. They'll take your money. They know they can't make money doing the work, so they'll just do nothing, or they'll do barely anything. So if you charge them enough, you don't have to charge with a setup fee. necessarily, because you can get it back on the $3,000 a month that you're charging or whatever. So that puts things into perspective a little bit for you. Even though somebody who charges $3,000 can also charge a setup fee, I'm just saying if they have no setup fee and they also do 10% of spend, it's likely just not enough, okay? Whereas the one that charges the $3,000 a month, they technically could get by with giving you a great setup and make it up on the fees that they're charging later. Two, the other firms typically have a setup fee, and if they don't, and I touched on this already, they're likely doing a terrible job helping you out in the first place. They're likely lying to your face, saying that you basically, oh, it only costs a little bit, just give us the money and you'll get results. How much results are you going to get, you ask them? Oh, I don't know, we'll just have to see. And then they don't have any numbers they gave you, really. And then they end up not doing any tracking, so you get into it 6 months, you don't even know what you got. So you have to be aware if they're not charging you enough, basically. That goes for the fee here, like we're talking about in this video, but just in general. If it seems too good to be true anyway, it is. If somebody could get results for $300 a month, why aren't they starting up their own company doing what you do or what somebody else does? At the end of the day, these companies want to make more or just as much as you're making, the people who run the firm. So you just got to put that in perspective. If you have 30, 40, 50 clients and you're charging $2,000-3,000 a month, now it's you could get somebody that's as smart as you. I always hear all the time, oh, I hired these other firms and I was smarter than they were about the PPC. Well, somebody who gets paid $40,000 a year or $50,000 a year to do PPC for you, that person is not the caliber of person you are. And it takes not just experience, but it takes IQ, a high IQ, and being able to learn stuff quickly and think broadly. And that's not going to come from somebody who's happy. Of course, there's good people like that start out that eventually will make more. But if they're happy at $40,000 a year, that's not a caliber A person. Sorry, I hate to offend anybody, but if you're going to, it's all about perspective. When you're competing in a market with people who do have caliber A people, you're dead in the water right away if you start with that hindrance against you. I'm going to get into it in a minute, and I've said it many times before. If you can't hire the right person, you do it yourself. You don't do this crappy middle ground where you hire a crappy person because that's all you can afford, or that's all I'm willing to pay, because I'm not willing to get my money back later. Because if you hire the right person, they'll get the results. There's no reason to hire a discount PPC person. Either they get the results or they don't. This whole thinking about, I can't pay too much, it sounds like a lot, is just coping and not dealing with the fact that you have to know your numbers going in. I need a $30 cost per conversion. I need an 8-to-1 ROI. I need to know how long it's going to take and be able to sit down and plan it out, realize it's not going to happen in one day or 1 week or 1 month a lot of times, and just go through with the determination that you're going to make it work no matter what. And don't think it's going to be too easy, because if it was easy, somebody else in your market would already be doing it, which they did, and it's been done for 5 or 10 years ago already. It's a different place now. So now there are a few exceptions. There's firms that don't charge very much, and they don't have a setup fee. And what they'll do is because they aren't doing much up front, they'll set up these like a target ROAS bidding with a dynamic ad campaign where the ads are built. It goes the campaign scans your site and creates an ad that points to each page and has a dynamically generated ad with the dynamically generated page that the ad is pointing to. So with that, you don't have a lot of setup time. You could actually set up a campaign that does that in about an hour or something like that. If you're in a market that's less competitive, that actually can be okay after you run your ads for a few months, okay? And so technically you wouldn't need a lot of work. But this is by far the exception here, okay? Respectively, 9 times out of 10, that's not going to work. And the reason it's not going to work is because if you have competition A lot of people don't recognize this either. I just made a video about this. There's 4 ads on the top of Google, and there's about 20 people getting cycled in and out. Google trying to find out who should be in there, who's getting the user, to the end point of satisfaction the easiest and the fastest, because that's who they want to be there. They charge them less, but they also just want to send all the traffic there so people click on ads in the future. And so if all it took was going in there and spending an hour, hiring somebody for an hour to do it, well, obviously that's something the competition could do for a couple $100. They would have done it already. So somebody else is going to do that, and then at that point, actually, it's whoever runs the campaigns the longest. If you have the same exact setup as the other guy, whoever's running it the longest is the one who wins, because through the machine learning, it's going to learn what keywords and what traffic pointed to what pages through process of elimination it should use. And so even if you start out that way, if you're making good money, there will be competitors probably at some point, and it probably ain't going to be good enough long term. But so you can go ahead and try this for yourself, but 90% chance that's not going to work because somebody went, the name of the game is, the reason why I don't use the automated campaigns that automatically make an ad and automatically decide what keywords to have it show up for and where to point the person to on your site is because that goes through most of the time. Again, there's exceptions. It'll go through a long learning process of figuring out what to do. Now, the algorithm's pretty good, but it's not as good as using your raw intelligence and hand-picking these keywords go with this page, and this ad is going to go with these keywords and this landing page. Why? Because I know what people say in the sales process, and I can tell that people, just what they want to basically see and hear, and then get them to the exact page on the site that I know that they would want to see, versus a computer trying to figure it out. They will figure it out, but most of you guys will go broke or give up before they figure it out. That's the point here, okay? So therefore, the setup fee right off the bat, having someone not just use Google's automation to do it is worth your money as long as it's done right, or if you don't have enough money, which I'm going to get into, you do it yourself. Okay, well, I'll jump into that in a second, but so why the setup fees? Because the typical time to set up when you're starting with a non-profitable results or non-profitable results in general. So I'm not assuming that you're already making $5 million a year on your ad campaign and you're spending $50,000 a month and you're trying to see if a setup fee is good for you at this point in the game. That's a different situation. In that case, a setup fee may not be absolutely necessary because they could start off with a base there and they're going to make small adjustments. Whereas you guys that are starting out with no results, expecting no setup time, no setup fees, or basically be able to pay the equivalent of a setup fee in the high cost of the service, as you can see that happening for the company that you're hiring, isn't going to be realistic because it takes, there's a lot of stuff involved in the process to get it done right. And if you don't have any base whatsoever, you've got to build that base. Like I just said a minute ago, you got to have a strong understanding. Somebody has to have some kind of strong understanding of what type of keywords, because a lot of times in most markets, you can't just do any keywords. You have to find what they call the long tail keywords. You sell a certain kind of product. Some people who search for that product are good versus some that are bad. So really what you have to do is find people that have cheap or expensive or high quality on the keyword, or say for apartment or for business. Otherwise you don't have the right business customer or whatever. And that takes time to figure out. It's not going to be done in an hour. And realistically, landing pages a lot of times that have to be built, which is 70% of the equation, whether or not your campaigns work, as to what they see when they get to the physical site, whether that's a landing page or otherwise. And you're talking about, at the very, very least, when you're starting out with no results, you don't have that base, 2 or 10 plus hours total of just doing that. And that 10 hours is literally, if you were in a small market and it's not that competitive, and I'm not trying to brag here, I'm just giving you perspective. I'm often spending a couple hundred hours in the keyword research in the development of the landing pages, because I don't just use one, and everybody doesn't, you can't speak to people individually when you send everybody to the same ad and the same landing page. That's why having multiple ads and multiple landing pages to send people to works so darn good, and it does. It works 2 to 5 times better than sending everybody to a standard ad. More so towards the 5 times better than having one message for everybody. You have a message for each type of search, and then you take them to a page that was properly built, and a lot of times we'll have a headline that matches what they searched on that landing page. You get, so that's what it took to get you from a 2-to-1 ROI to a 10-to-1 ROI to actually make it work in a lot of cases. Why? Because this is now what the competition's willing to do. When the competition's willing to do a little bit of work and you do way more, what Google charges for the traffic that they can't get away with charging more, or they would, you're now getting 5 times more out of that same traffic. Now you can afford to suck up all the traffic, and the other people are going to be wondering how you can. And you're going to be in that position that you see other people now, the top 10% of the ones doing Google ads now are doing, that you want to be in. But in terms of the setup time, there's so much stuff involved. And if you don't hire somebody that's going to be the thousands per month, or a lot of times they're charging $3,000, it actually is not enough, really. For me, if I wanted to charge properly to cover all my costs for a client on average, I'm charging $7,000, something like that. And that's still cutting it close. Really, it should be $10,000, just to put things into perspective. Why? Because there's a bunch of stuff you have to get done. Everything's got to be done just right so that when you turn on your ads, it doesn't spend $100,000 before you're break-even profitable and you've run out of money before you ever got started. You got tracking the leads, phone calls or form fills. You got to know, did it work or did it not work? Are you hitting your cost per lead that you know you got to hit starting out, when after you figure your close rates and your margins, they're where you're profitable? You got to start with that number. You got to have tracking set up, and you got to know if you hit that number after you started. And if you don't, you got to be able to use the data to refine your ads so that you will hit that number eventually. And it's not a matter of if it will work, it's what, when. And the better you set it up initially, the more likely you'll have it work before you run out of money. That's basically the whole thing. And then with the lead tracking, a lot of times we're doing revenue tracking or opportunity tracking. So if a lead is highly variable, you need to track that lead if it turns into an opportunity or a sale, and then pipe that back into your ad account. That's called offline conversion tracking. We do that for clients. And if you need that's a lot more work than just the base level lead tracking. Or if you're e-commerce, of course, you need revenue tracking. If you sell something over a couple $100, you also want to, on an e-commerce site, track phone calls and form fills. Why? Because a lot of people will call, think about it for a long time, and if you don't have that data, you're losing a lot of data. And so realistically, what I'll do, if you spend over $200 on an item, I'm tracking the calls and the form fills when they come in, and then if they buy within 90 days, I'm going to take that data and pipe it back into my ad account. Why? Because if I wait for people to come back to the site, they often will switch devices. They won't have cookies available to be downloaded on their device or whatever, and I'm only getting half of the data. Half of the value of what you're doing PPC, what you're paying for PPC, is the data that told you what didn't work and what did, so you can take budget away from what didn't work as well and put it towards and double down on the part that is working better than average. So we do all that tracking up front. Most of the people wait, or they say, screw it, I don't know how to do it. A firm that knows what they're doing and helps you with it, it's going to be more expensive in general, so they have to charge that somewhere. You got keyword research. The people that are spending an hour or two on this, they're going to go through Google's recommended keyword list, add, whereas we're going to really deeply think about what's the best ideal customer. Are they typing in expensive? Are they typing in long range? Whatever that suffix or prefix on your keyword needs to be to narrow down your perfect customer. We'll find that, and then we'll find all variations of, not when we find one keyword that goes with that, long range antenna, okay, not just antenna. What's all the different ways of saying long range and antenna now, and come up with hundreds of different ways to say for the perfect customer we're looking for, that we could target them individually. So we're not just kind of scooping out some customers, we're getting basically 80+% of them. And that takes a long time. You got to build a campaign physically. I don't use one ad for everything. Every keyword of the hundreds of keywords get their own ad. If you want to do really, really well and guaranteed beat your competition, and I do literally mean guaranteed beat them, because what I'm telling you here, 98% of people aren't going to be willing to do. So if you're doing it, you're going to win. It might take a little while to get it off the ground, as I mentioned, because things need to be broken in. It takes a few months to get things going, but you should constantly see your results go up and to the right after you've launched it, and you should be able to see where you're going to be able to break even, and it's not going to be years, it's going to be months. Or sometimes in weeks, if you're going to get lucky, it's a local market. The ad copywriting. A lot of you guys are just going to, you don't get the seriousness of the ad that you're writing there on the Google search or whatever. The language and framework in which you write that ad is going to dictate if you get a 3% click-through rate or a 5 or 7 or 10. And if you get a 7% click-through rate instead of 3%, you're going to pay twice as much for the click. So you've handicapped yourself a ton right off the bat if you're just swinging the ad. Somebody who knows how to write ads has written a lot of ads. They call them copywriters for a reason. You're going to get a copywriter that's going to really, really think about how your ad should be written, and then when you have multiple ads, are they going to come up with a system so that every ad can practically have that, most optimized system that was figured out for your particular market, given that you know what people in that market want to see and what they want to hear, and what, working at a promotion into there to get an even more response than you could have otherwise got, so to really stand out from the ads, because ultimately they search for the antenna, like I gave you in that example before, long-range antenna. They're going to decide which of the 4 ads to click on. If there are that 20% who wants to click on an ad that wants an answer now or wants to buy now, what are you going to do to make sure your ad is the one that you click on 80% of the time? Because that's where the mega money comes in. If you could figure that out, you've got it made. So that's a task. Yet landing pages. Most firms that especially don't have a setup fee, they're not going to do any landing pages. 80% of PPC firms are not going to do landing pages at all. And that's 70% of the equation, whether you're going to make money or not just the ad. The ad is minimal. It still has to be right, but 70% of the equation depends on how good that landing page is. Or at the very least, if you have an e-commerce site that's pretty good and you don't really think you need a landing page, which, in the e-commerce space, more than half don't need a landing page. You still have to, for each keyword, hand select the best page to send them to. A search results page, a category page, a product page, and if not, what product specifically to send them to. So there's a lot of things to decide there. And if you have 500 keywords, all which have slightly different intent, you got to now spend time keyword by keyword. As far as if you're going to do it right, in which the consumer wants, and not just wing it and say, oh, screw them. And then, maybe you make money, maybe you don't. That takes a while. And then, you got banner ad development. I speak a lot about remarketing on this PPC Strategies channel. And basically half of your potential is squandered from the traffic you drive into your site if you do no follow-up whatsoever. You spend 10% or so of your budget on just follow-up. And when you do the follow-up, you're going to have to do, banner ads. So when they leave, they're on CNN.com reading an article. You want your ad to show up there that shows a testimonial for the antenna that you're selling. So the person knows a little bit better that you're the best product in the market for what they need. So when they do go to buy, because 80 to 90% of people aren't going to buy their first visit, they're going to think about it for a while. And the more that expensive the product is or service is, the longer they're going to think about it. And so you have these ads, and you shouldn't just have one ad, because everybody tries to do one ad and just beat people over the head over and over again with the same darn ad and won't add any value. It'll say, are you ready to buy now? Okay, no? Okay, how about now? No? How about now? No? How about now? Whereas you'll get to be where you literally can double the amount of overall money you're making for the same ad spend if you have a few different ads, with different testimonials and your reviews on Google, and maybe some product testing that you've had done by a third party. Also, another thing that I do is like you have a YouTube video like I have here and have that show up for people who've been to your site. Because ultimately, you're trying to build up that relationship the rest of the way with the person that's came to your site so that they trust you. And if you do that and your competition doesn't, when they do go to buy, however long later that is, you've automatically done the work up front to get that sale almost every time. So if they're doing things right, they got to have some banner ads. They may have to help you with, we don't get into the video itself, but, having a video certainly helps enhance what you're doing with remarketing quite a bit, especially anymore. So you have that. So when you factor all that stuff up, you're talking about so you could see why $3,000 really isn't enough. It should be like $10,000 just for the setup before the ads even touch the public. And that's real, okay? We make up for it with the fees that we charge later on down the line. We're not an astronomically priced firm, but realistically, we know people don't like setup fees, so we kind of we know it will work. We'll keep the client for a while, so we'll kind of amortize it in the 2 years that they'll spend with us, whatever. But either way you slice it, whether they charge a setup fee or not, you got to ask them, are you doing these things? That's a good way to tell if you're going to be in a bad position, because maybe if they're too cheap, it will sound too good to be true. So you could ask this stuff, and if they stutter or whatever, or hesitate explaining this stuff to you, you can know your chances of getting this to pay for itself after all your expenses, so you could have a profitable campaign that you could run and scale it, goes down tremendously. So hopefully that kind of puts in perspective what the setup fees are about. Now, respectively, as I've mentioned on a couple of other videos that I made, once you're at kind of $500,000 in revenue a year in your business, you are in the position where you have enough money, you shouldn't be doing this stuff yourself. You should be hiring a pro. Why? Because your time at that point is more valuable working on your operations, given that that's something that you can improve, and you're going to be not so efficient at improving the ads because it's a specialized skill, just like you wouldn't do your own accounting. Why would you? Well, maybe some of you guys do, but respectively, as your accounting gets more complicated and you grow, are you going to always do your own accounting? No. It's in the beginning you do it because you have to, but eventually you get out of it. And so, can you do this yourself? Absolutely. If you guys are just starting out, what you do is you watch a ton of my videos, you start with a small $100 a month budget, and you try things, and you see what works, and you see what doesn't, and you try, and you try, and you try, and you try. Anybody can do PPC and beat even the most longest running incumbents in your market running their ads. It's a matter of, are you going to do the things that your consumer wants to do, and are you going to help them better than somebody else? And it takes some time, but if you don't have any money, you have more time than money, then I've got all the information for you for free on this channel. It's up to you to do it. Can you do it all yourself in super competitive markets? So if your market is not very competitive, yes, you probably could do your ads yourself, even if you're bigger, and make money, because people already kind of just want your product. But anything, 80% of markets where millions are at stake, and there are a decent amount of competitors, you're not going to be able to compete doing it all yourself. Why? Because a lot of those guys that make several $1 million a year, they got guys like me working on their stuff, and they're consistently paying into it. They're not just paying me to help them out a little bit and then stop. They're hiring me, and I'm stacking results on top of results on top of results on top of results. And there you are sitting there just working on it an hour a month. Respectively, you can do a lot better than the agencies do just by caring. But at the same time, you only got so much time also to get it to work before you run out of money. So, respectively, I just tell people, do enough to get it off the ground, and then have a real expert take it to the next level. You're better off taking a cut on your own pay if you can than doing it yourself, as you will have to likely screw it up several times first and watch dozens of hours of content on my channel or could be elsewhere to outdo your market's incumbents with years of experience and time under their belt. So it's not so much that you can't do it yourself, right? It's that, like I said, your competition a lot of times will have hired guys like me, and they're constantly improving, and it's not just that they have the guy, also the more data that they acquire and the more familiar Google gets with running their ads, the better those ads get. Well, that's what keeps a lot of people out of PPC, by the way, as well. People think, oh, I've ran the ads for a month, they don't work. No, they work better and better and better the more data Google gets on the exact type of people who, when they search for your keywords, they should be sending you. Because what they eventually figured out is, long range antenna, that keyword, males seem to convert well, but females don't. So we're just going to send you males, and that's it. But they have thousands of different pieces of information on every user that uses Google, and they store this in a database. And so Google, over time, naturally, even if you're doing manual bidding, they're going to, enhanced CPC bidding, and that's what we use here, but they'll eventually figure out how to send better and better traffic to you. You also optimize on your end as long as you're not using like totally automated bidding. And so from, the agency person, the strategist that they hire side, they can use data to improve, and then Google uses their own data to improve. And when they have years of runway or years of data from both sides where they have improved their account, and little old you is starting out, you're going against Goliath here. So if you're going to win, you're going to have to try to do just like if you're going to enter the market in the first time. They say if you're going to enter the market, what you have, assuming you're going against big players, has to be 10 times more better than your competition, because you're going to be so efficient when you start out. That's the only way you're not going to go broke before you really get off the ground. And the PPC is the same way in a competitive market. You got to watch my strategies and do what nobody else is willing to do. And you're still going to fail a crap load of times before you really figure it out. There's no way you're going to read content and just know exactly what to do right away, no matter what the content is, because no content's going to be absolutely perfect for your exact market unless you somehow got the inside workings of somebody who's in your exact market and their campaigns. But even then, I can tell you I can use a brand new campaign just to kind of polish this off here and apply it to your campaign. It's still not going to work as good as the first guy's campaign until it's been running for the same amount of time, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. It'll run significantly worse. We're talking about 5 times worse day one versus a campaign, same keywords that have been running for a couple of years. This is just part of the system that you have to know going in. But if you go in knowing that you're going to make it work like your life depended on it and just consistently try to get better numbers, it'll be a matter of time before you get the numbers you need to be profitable. And if you go in with that attitude, it will work. And obviously you just limit the amount of money that you're spending, you got to be, the budget you go in with initially trying to learn it for yourself, assume it's going to be gone. And assume that it's going to continue to be gone for a long time, and it's just an investment in your future to figure out how this thing works. Eventually, when it works, you'll make it all back, and it's a process. So, anyway, anybody could do 10 times more in terms of when I say 10 times more, it's, consumers want to be able to see a different landing page for your antennas that are, high-end versus your mid-range one, because the different person that goes for the long-range antenna wants for a different, like maybe a military application versus a mid-range one, it might be a hobbyist application. Well, those two use cases are so different. If you have different pages for each one of them, you're going to end up selling twice as much by splitting the traffic. And that's the type of thing that when I say do 10 times more. If you do that stuff, whereas your fat and happy competitors, they're already making enough, they're not as hungry anymore. The PPC agencies they do hire, you're only going to spend so much time on it. And if you go ahead there's always a way to do 10 times more. It's just really my point here. So anyway, if you hire the agency, I just thought I would give you a quick tip on this as well. 90% of PPC agencies still will not do it right. And it's a job in itself to figure out the person that's going to set this all up for you or take it over. Respectively, it takes a lot of research. The 2 tips I could give you on that to actually find the one that's not full of crap and actually can get results. I gave you the one already. They're not charging 10% of ad spend when you have a $3,000 starting ad budget, which the ad budget, I'm not making fun of the budget or anything. I'm just saying when you have a small budget, you realize they're not going to get you off the ground for $300 a month unless you're in a very low competitive market. You read their content. Do they have articles? Do they have YouTube videos where you could analyze, are they talking on it? Does what they say make sense? You may not have to understand what they're doing per se, but does it sound logical? That's one basic filter, because only 10% of people out there that run an agency are going to be doing that. So it makes it easy to that's a big filter that you can have. But then also with that, you contact them, have you talk to the person who's going to actually be the strategist on your campaign. Why? Because that's the person who's going to be steering the ship, and you can know by talking to them if they're just one of those people that try to look busy and don't really care anything about PPC, or are they really passionate about PPC and do they know what they're talking about? And you may not be able to talk to him regularly after you start, but through that conversation, you can know if that guy's an idiot, basically, or not. And if you do that and you're paying enough, it shouldn't at least be total garbage. There's no promise on either one of those, but respectively, if you're going to pay a lot, you kind of already have to be going already. Unfortunately, they're not going to set everything up for you on a low cost. Sorry, that's not what's going to happen. You're going to have to do some work up front. You're going to have to go the long way about it initially and find out what you can do to 10x in terms of user experience, what the other person's doing. Having more keywords, you can have more tighter ad copy that matches the keyword on an individual basis. You have more landing pages that more closely match what the person was typing in when they typed it in, or whatever. There's a bunch of things I won't get into on this video, but you'll have to do that, and hopefully eventually you get to the point where you can hand it over, and at that point you've already proven your business model. You get to 500K, and you got there a lot by doing the PPC, that you should be able to scale really easy to 5 million once you hand it over. So there's a pile of gold waiting for you if you can just figure out how to get things going. It is worth the time. In any B2C market, Google is like critical, and you can sit there and say it's too expensive, or you can take my advice and you can figure out what people want and just give them what they want more than what your competition's doing, and you'll be the one that can, make the money. Respectively, as I mentioned many times on this channel, only 10 or 20% of people who do Google Ads are going to make money. The rest of them will make a little bit or none at all. Why? Because a lot of people don't track the results, so they don't know what they're making. They try to do, at the point of purchase, they'll ask their customer, how did you find us? And they'll say, Google. Well, you don't know if they found you through Google for Google Organic or whatever versus Google PPC or Google Ads or whatever. And a lot of times people have business coming in from, previous referrals, people coming in from trade shows, other sources of marketing, and the Google Ads really lose money, but it doesn't take them down. And so with the tracking, especially when that's not working, they can run the ads forever and never run out of money. So just because they're running the ads doesn't mean it's working. And because the average person's going to spend a few hours setting up their account and not work on it regularly, they're going to, those people are easy to get their butt kicked by the people who are consistently putting work in, using their data, adding more and more levels of sophistication to their account, that the people that do that naturally end up in the top 10 or 20%, and they're the one who makes basically 80% of the money. That's actually what Google technically wants, even though they don't outright say it. They want there to be a reward system for the people who will go ahead and do all the thing, many ads, many landing pages, use your data really well, so on and so forth. Hook up offline conversion tracking if you're generating any kind of leads at all for your e-commerce business or non-e-commerce business, and use that data. And so that with all the work it takes, that it becomes worth it for those people to do that. And they want people to compete against each other, to constantly outdo each other in terms of adding more sophistication to what they're doing to serve the users better in their market, so that the overall experience people get through Google Ads gets better and better all the time. And so if you want to know how to really make the millions with Google Ads, that's what you got to do, one way or another. So as far as the setup, you can avoid the setup by doing it yourself. The other firms, they can charge several $1,000s. Really, it's, to do it right, upwards of $10K worth of work. They may amortize that in terms of the thousands per month that they already charge, but if they don't charge you thousands a month already, and they're not charging you the setup fee, be very wary that you're actually getting the right kind of work, that after 3 months of starting your ads, you end up scratching your head wondering where all your money went, and was there any value there whatsoever? At the very least, if you have tracking set up and you go about it the right way, you don't make what you want after 3 months. Maybe you made half, you know exactly how much you made, you know exactly what didn't work, and you can slice out the part that didn't work. So a totally different perspective if you start out with a different approach, a quality approach starting out with what you're doing. So, and if you have an established account, you probably can get by without a setup fee many times. If you're already doing millions a year in sales and you're at ROI that's approachable to what's reasonable for your business already, because we can start with smaller tweaks to what you have at that case, not building you up a foundation. So that's everything in a nutshell. I covered it and summarized for you there. If you want to make a ton of money with PPC, like I said on this video, you should definitely see my other videos. I have a lot of other strategies that I personally use on our clients' accounts here, which can help you get started and make eventually a lot of money with your PPC. I have a blog at guaranteedppc.com/blog with step-by-step instructions on how to build campaigns that are basically guaranteed to work every time. If you want to really understand how to do things, on a more individual step-by-step basis, you can find information along those lines there. If you have any questions about the setup fees process, anything having to do with setup fees, or anything else I talk about, leave a comment down below. I get back to every single person who leaves me a comment on this channel within a day or two time. And with all that said, I hope you enjoyed the video. It was entertaining and educating for you. And I hope to see you in my next one that comes out in another day with another good PPC strategy on it. Have a good one.